Hey everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today, we're doing probably the most adorable tutorial I have yet to do on my channel. Are you ready to see what we're making? Today, we're making the Olive Vanity Bag by Swoon. I cannot handle how adorable this bag is. Oh my goodness. I mean, you know that I am proud of every single bag that I make, but this is a work of art. I adore this bag. So, real quick run through. Let's see, there's a little slip pocket on the front, which is so cute. On the top, we have two zippers that pull all the way around down to the bottom, and it opens just like that. Come on, right? Oh my goodness, we've got this cute little handle on top for carrying around, because where would you not want to take this? So this is also a collaborative video. I'm working with Zeep, and they make bath and body products that are just as adorable as this stinking bag. So Ashley is the owner of Zeep. They're located in Wichita, Kansas, and they make the scrummiest, most beautiful bath products you have ever seen. Ashley was so kind and sent me over some beautiful bath products for me to show you today. In my mind, with everything going on in the world right now, this vanity case with these bath products from Zeep, which you guys are gonna just like, they're so cute. That is like the perfect gift for someone who could really use a moment to calm down, right? There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of questions and a lot of frustrations going on right now. Personally, I think that this bag full of products that smell good, make you feel good, that just force you to kind of relax is the absolute perfect gift you could give pretty much anybody right now. All right, so I'm gonna real quick show you what they sent over, and then we're gonna get back to discussing the bag, and then we're gonna jump into the tutorial. Don't forget that timestamps for every single step of the bag are down in the comment section down below. They'll be at the top of the comment section. It is a comment from me to you. Click on the timestamp and it will take you straight there in the video. Okay, you guys know I'm a sucker for packaging, so just look at this. This is how it arrives. Full of pink, which, I mean, I love pink. I love pink. We're just gonna real quick kind of dive into this. This is a body meringue. It's like a lotion. It smells so stinking good. It has like an orange creamsicle smell, which, come on, orange creamsicle. It feels super good. I'm a huge fan of this body lotion. So next we have this beautiful body butter scrub. And this, like, look, can you see that there's like gold swirls in there? Isn't that crazy? So this is just like a nice scrub that you use in the bath. Oh my gosh. Okay, this smells like Kool-Aid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, did any of you guys when you were a kid, you would like have Kool-Aid and, I mean, it's just me, okay. But this kind of smells like that. It smells so good. Next is this sugar whip. And this is probably my husband's favorite. Like, this smells like Fruity Pebbles. I don't know if it's supposed to smell like Fruity Pebbles, but to me it smells like Fruity Pebbles. And it is just so yummy. All right, next we have this beautiful whipped soap here. Again, you see with the gold, and they have so many products on their site that are swirled with different colors. Just so you know, this was all sent to me for free, but I did put in an order yesterday for a bunch of this stuff because I really, really like it. And last, they sent me this beautiful body spray right here. This comes in a really nice glass bottle. And this just smells clean. Like, this smells like the beach. It smells like Florida, and I absolutely adore that. Okay, so come on. This, all of this stuff in here together, right? Look at this gift. Look how adorable this is as a gift. I'm just saying, this Olive Vanity case, look at this. Bam. The most beautiful case ever. Seriously, this is probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever made. Full of the best smelling, super, super luxurious, super, super yummy smelling bath products. Like, this is the feel good package of 2020. I'm just saying, we are in March of 2020 and it's been a bit of a year. This is the feel good gift. So Ashley, thank you so much for sending me these amazing bath products from Zeep. Like I said, I already have another order in with you. I hope I get it soon because, girl, I need it. If you're interested in purchasing from Zeep, make sure you look at the description down below. I will have a link to their website. Also, make sure you're paying attention on Instagram, Facebook, and on the discussion posts on YouTube because I will be hosting a giveaway for a gift card to Zeep. So keep an eye out for that. All right, back to the bag for a minute. In this tutorial, we are switching up the pattern just a little bit. I will have a link for a video down below by Birdcage and Thread, and she did a fantastic job of switching up the size of the gussets and the size of the zipper so that this bag opens completely flat just like that. The original pattern does not have the bag opening like that. The original pattern has the zipper going to about here on the side so that when you open it, it kind of opens like this, which is still adorable, but it's a little bit less usable. Being able to open this all the way so that it lays flat just makes this such an easier bag to use every day when you're traveling, just playing with it because it makes you happy. So the alterations I made to this bag today were provided by Birdcage and Thread. I do suggest you go check out her video, which will be down in the description below. She has a couple other suggestions for like adding a mesh pocket, which are really cool and I hope to do on a future bag. On this first version that I made, I did use Decoville Light. Today I'm going to be using Craft Fuse, and I'm just going to let you know if there's a difference in the feel. I don't think so. Decoville Light and Pellon Craft Fuse 808 are very similar to one another, but I just want to let you know this one was made with Decoville Light. The version today will be using the pattern suggested Pellon Craft Fuse 808. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, give it a like. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, leave them in the comment section down below. You can always email me at jessica@OklaRoots.com. Let's get started. So for the olive, you're going to need a half a yard of exterior fabric that's going to be 44 inches wide. I'm using quilt cotton today. For the lining, since we're doing the large size, you're going to need 2/3 of a yard of quilt cotton. I'm actually using 2 different ones, and I'll show you that whenever we go through the different pattern pieces. For our interfacing, we're going to use 1 1/4 yard of Pellon Craft Fuse 808. 2/3 of a yard of foam interfacing. I get this from By Annie. And then a scrap of fusible stabilizer like Pellon Peltex 71F. You're going to need 2.5 yards of pre-made piping. I made my piping myself, and I will have a link for the tutorial down below. It's a tutorial from Dana with Made Every Day. You'll need 2 1-inch rectangular rings. And then a zipper. I'm actually using zipper tape today, and I will be using 2 zipper pulls on this modified version of the bag. My zipper tape and zipper pulls are all from My Handmade Space. So today I'll be using Aurifil 40 weight cotton thread. I'm using one color that coordinates with my bag, and then I have a second color that will stand out a little bit more, and I'm going to be using that for attaching the piping. I'll be using Microtex 8012 needles. To help with attaching the zipper, I have this 1/4 inch double-sided tape and this Beacon 3-in-1 craft glue to help me. To assist me when sewing the curves, I'm going to try out this small stapler. And to help me with marking, I have this air erasing sew line marker. So like I said, I'm adjusting the opening of the bag as instructed by the tutorial in Birdcage and Thread. And again, I have a link for that down in the description. In order to facilitate a wider opening, we're going to change the bottom panel measurement. Instead of a long rectangle, we're going to make sure that the bottom panel is as long as it is wide. So measure how wide your pattern piece is, and then just make sure you cut it the same length. It should end up a perfect square. You're going to do that for your lining, for your exterior, and your foam, as well as your Craft Fuse stiff interfacing. For top panel B, we're going to keep the width the same, but the length is going to be changed to 26.5 inches long. And for top panel A, we'll do the same thing. The width will stay the same, but the length will be 26.5 inches long. When cutting top panels A and B, make sure you note that there is a dashed line here. So you're going to cut your exterior, your lining, and both of your stiff interfacings at the width of the entire pattern piece. But when cutting the foam interfacing, you want to fold down on that dashed line and then cut the foam interfacing at a shorter width. You'll do the same thing with top panel A. You'll cut your exterior lining and both of your stiff interfacing using the full width of the panel, but before you cut the foam, just fold along that dashed line and cut your foam at a more narrow width. For example, using top panel B, you'll see my exterior, interfacing, and lining are all the same width, but my foam is just a bit more narrow. This is intentional, and we'll go over how to attach this in the next step. From the slip pocket panel, you're going to have 1 lining piece cut, 1 exterior piece cut, and the stiff interfacing cut and attached to the exterior. There will be no interfacing attached to the lining of the slip pocket panel. From your main panel unit, you'll have 1 exterior piece cut out. This will be sewn onto your foam interfacing. You'll need to cut out 3 lining pieces. 2 of these lining pieces will be on the inside of the bag, and they will both need to be interfaced with the stiff interfacing. The 3rd lining piece is actually going to be seen on the exterior of the bag just behind the slip pocket. So I chose a different fabric for that one. This piece will not have stiff interfacing. Instead, it will be sewn onto the foam. Last, for the strap, you will have one long strip of fabric and a small cut of Peltex. The measurements for this are in the pattern. So when attaching your interfacing to the bottom panel, we want to make sure that the bottom panel can bend appropriately since we're making this modification to the bag and we want the flap to open completely. We don't want any interfacing preventing that from happening. So when attaching your craft fuse to the bottom panel, we're going to cut it before we attach it. And to figure out your measurements, just fold down on those dashed lines of both top panel A and top panel B, measure those, and then cut your interfacing for your bottom panel according to the width of each one of these top panels. You know what I'm saying. Just measure the width of both top panel A, top panel B, and that will give you the width cuts for your craft fuse for the bottom panel. This way, when the lining is opening and closing, it folds nicely. So for the foam for the exterior bottom panel, what I did was I measured this same width, so from the top to the bottom of our stiff interfacing cut, I measured that same width, drew a line, and I just took my scissors and sliced the top layer of the foam. So I'm not cutting through the entire foam, I'm just slicing through the top half of it. This way the foam will also bend nicely in our bag. I did not do this on my previous version, and I did find that when I'm opening and closing the bag, the foam kind of puts up a fight and it makes it a little bit more difficult to get it to lay flat. So today we're just going to try scoring this and see if that helps. So now we're going to attach our foam to the wrong side of the exterior bottom panel. Just line it up along all the edges. And we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew this down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance along all 4 sides. When attaching this, it's easiest if you sew this on with the fabric side facing down. So top panels A and B have their interfacing attached just a little bit differently, so I'm going to show you how to do that on top panel B. For top panel A, you're going to want to make sure your foam interfacing is attached to the wrong side of your exterior fabric along the bottom edge, and you're going to base this on along the 3 edges of your strip. You're not going to sew along the top edge. The foam should not come up all the way to the exterior fabric. After you have the foam basted on, you'll then fuse it on to the wrong side over the foam and on the wrong side of the exterior panel. This just holds everything together. So I'm going to show you how to do that on top panel B. For top panel B, we're going to turn our fabric over. If you have a directional print, make sure your directional print is facing up and then the wrong side up. And the foam interfacing will just be attached to the top of this one. So make sure you check the diagram in the pattern if you get a little confused by this. She does a great job of showing you exactly how to lay this all out. So I'm just using a couple little clips to hold it in place. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to base this on along the 3 edges, leaving this bottom edge that doesn't quite meet up with the exterior edge completely unsewn. We're going to base this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So once we have this basted on, now we want to adhere our craft fuse. Don't forget that the shiny side of your craft fuse is the sticky side. So we want that side down against the back of the foam and just line it up over your panel. Now, craft fuse doesn't like to be ironed on the back. So what I'm going to try is using a pressing cloth, which is just a scrap piece of fabric. And I'm going to lay my pressing cloth over the back side of my craft fuse and see if that will help me get it to adhere. I am using steam to help with this. Craft fuse prefers to be adhered from the front side of the fabric. But since we have all that foam, it's hard to get it hot enough to melt with the foam in the way. And that seems to work pretty well. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just adhering it to the foam right now. Don't worry too much about this bottom edge. We'll take care of that in just a minute. So let's just go down and get the craft fuse glued on to the foam. So once we have the stiff interfacing adhered to the back of the foam, we can go ahead and flip this right side up. And now we can fuse the interfacing on to the bottom part of our unit that does not have the foam by ironing on the right side of the fabric. All right, so now you should have all of your pattern pieces fused and ready to be sewn. So the first thing we're going to do is make the slip pocket. Take both your exterior and your lining pieces of your slip pocket and face them right sides together, matching up all of the edges. And you can add some clips around the entire unit just to keep it all in place. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew around this inner circle only at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have your pocket sewn, we're going to go along that curved edge and just cut little slits about 1/2 inch away from each other, close to the stitches, but don't actually cut the stitches all the way around. This will just make sure we have a nice smooth curve when we turn our pocket right side out. Okay, so now we're going to flip both panels so that they are wrong sides together. So just pull it over. And you might notice that that craft fuse likes to kind of stay where it is, but if you fold it, it's almost like paper. It'll fold and it will stay nicely. So just go along that edge, folding along the curve. There you go. And I just give it a little fold first, and then I will clip some of the pieces out of the way and then press it. But it's easiest if you just fold it with your fingers first. So now I like to just clip these bottom corners just like that. What that does is it kind of pulls on the fabric around that circle and it makes it easier for me to press it. Here we go. And you can do the same up top as well if it helps. More clips always help. Now let's just press along that curve. And you'll notice that when you press, that stiff interfacing softens up quite a bit. So you can kind of manipulate your seam however you need while it's warm. And then when it cools off, it stiffens up again. All right, now we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch around this circle at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so if you have any excess up top, we can go ahead and clip that off now. There we go, and that is a cute little pocket. So now grab your lining main panel that has the foam attached. Like I said, I'm using a different fabric for my lining for this part because I really wanted this print to be what peeks through the pocket, but I didn't have enough of this to do lining for the entire bag. So all we have to do now is lay our pocket so that it's exterior side up and just adjust it to fit along those bottom corners. And it should just round nicely with the top. Just kind of move it around as you need to. And this is what your little pocket will look like. That is adorable. All right, so now I'm just going to clip this in place around the entire edge of my exterior pocket. So now what we're going to do is we're going to baste this on. We're going to sew around this only along the exterior pocket portion. So this is your pocket on your panel. You can go ahead and put this to the side for now. So now grab your top panel A and top panel B exterior and lay them right sides together so that the two edges that do not have the foam are up against one another. You can go ahead and just clip these in place. All right, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew at a 1-inch seam allowance. For the first 1/2 inch, we'll sew at a normal 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Make sure you back stitch well at the beginning and the end of that. Once you get to that 1/2 inch mark, you're going to increase your stitch length to like 5 or 6, pretty much as big as it can go on your machine. Continue along your panels at a 1-inch seam allowance until you get 1/2 inch away from the end, and then you're going to reduce that stitch length again down to 2.5 millimeters, back stitch really well at the beginning and the end. What we're doing is we're creating the pocket for the zipper. So we want the ends to be nice and strong, but we want the middle to be easy to remove after we have the zipper installed. I'm going to go ahead and mark on my panels where 1/2 inches, just so I don't forget. And the pattern has a great diagram to help you with this if you can't quite visualize it. So let's take this to the machine. So once you have these sewn together, all we want to do now is just press that seam allowance open. So just open it up on the back. And I'm going to use a pressing cloth again, just because this craft fuse doesn't like it when my iron directly touches it. But if you use stiff interfacing, you should be able to feel underneath that pressing cloth really well. All right, so now let's grab our zipper. So since we adjusted the length of this entire unit, the zipper is a different length. So first I'm going to attach my zipper pulls to the zipper tape. I'm using 2 zipper pulls today so that when I open the bag, I'll pull them apart, and when I close them, I will push it back together. To do this, I just attach the zipper pulls to each end of the zipper tape. So once I have my zipper pulls attached, when I pull them apart, it will open the bag, and when I push them together, it will close it. I like my zipper tape to be at least as long as this panel. I do prefer it to hang over the edge a little bit so that way I can trim it down. So I like my zipper to be at least 26.5 inches long for the large size of the Olive. So when applying the zipper, we want to place it face down over the back of our top A and top B panels, just centered along that seam. So the zipper tape should be centered just along it like that. To help you keep this in place, you can use tape or glue or some clips. If you use tape, it can kind of gunk up your needle, so just make sure you have like a little alcohol wipe or something nearby that you can wipe your needle off with when you're done. So last time I put the zipper on, I used tape, so today I'm going to try using this glue. And you just want to make sure you attach it on the edge of your zipper tape, not too close to the teeth. We don't want this glue to show in any way whenever we're done. And I'm not very liberal with it. I'm just kind of putting a few dots here and there, right along the edge, just like that. Okay, I'm going to do the other side as well. And now I'm just going to lay my zipper tape over that center seam, just using my fingers to feel around and make sure the teeth are going right over that center seam between panels A and B. I'm going to just kind of get my pulls out of the way since I'm using these big old pulls. All right, so now the hard part. After you have your zipper attached, we're going to actually sew it down from the front of our panels. The tricky thing about this is that with all this foam, it's hard for your zipper foot to feel where the zipper tape is, and we can't see what we're doing. So we're just going to go nice and slow. We're going to sew 1/4 inch away from the seam and hope it all works out. Okay, once you have your zipper sewn on, you can go ahead and trim down any extra zipper tape you have. You can see that because I have these really big zipper pulls, in order for me to move the zipper out of the way when I was sewing, I had to unstitch some of this, which is perfectly fine. Because now you're going to take your seam ripper and you're just going to run it along the center seam between top panel A and B, making sure you stop once you get to about 1/2 inch from the edge. You should get a little bit more resistance once you get there because we have those thicker stitches. So stop over there and then do the same on the other side. All right, now you just have to pull out all these little threads. And as you saw when I was sewing, instead of using my zipper foot, I used my 1/4 inch foot. That really helps because we don't actually want to get too close to the zipper. If you get too close to your zipper teeth, it's going to be hard for you to open and close this. So keeping a 1/4 inch away from those helps a lot with using the bag. All right, you can go ahead and put your exterior panel to the side. Now grab your top A and B lining pieces, and we're going to do the same thing except we're not attaching these to a zipper. So lay them right sides together, lining up the long edge, and clip in place. So once again, we're going to sew along this edge at a 1-inch seam allowance, making sure that at the first half and the last half inch, we use a regular 2.5mm stitch length. We backstitch really well. Between those 1/2 inch marks, we're going to use about a 6mm stitch length, just like we did with the exterior pieces. So once you have these stitched together, just like before, we're going to press them open, and then we'll press the seam on the back open as well, just like that. Again, I'm going to use a pressing cloth. All right, so with the lining, we don't have a zipper to install to it, so you can just use your seam ripper to pull apart those two edges. And make sure you leave the 1/2 inch ends sewn together. So to help you pull up some of these little threads that are poking through, if you have an eraser, or like my friction pen has this little eraser on the back, you can just flip over within the seam and then just like erase over those stitches, and you'll see they all just kind of pull out, and you can wipe them off. And this just helps get all those threads out really nicely. There we go. Okay, go ahead and put your lining panel to the side. So now we're going to build the handle. So take your handle right side down and fold the two edges that are longer, wrong sides together. And then just press along that fold. And then open it up, and then fold your raw long edges, wrong sides together up to meet that center fold. Do this both on the top and the bottom. All right, so if you're making the large size like I am, this should be about 1 inch wide now. Okay, so now we're going to cut 2 3-inch long strips off of this long strip. So one that's 3 inches. There's another one that's 3 inches. Go ahead and set these to the side for now. All right, so now what we want to do is tuck in our stabilizer into our handle. To do that, we want to make sure it's centered on the handle. So I'm just going to fold it in half real quick just to get a little bit of a crease. And you want the glue side down, just like this. So you're going to tuck it in there and then fold it back. If you find that your handle is just a little bit too wide, meaning that the long raw edges of your fabric can't meet, just trim it down a little bit. So mine's a little too wide. And just trim down like a 1/16 of an inch. And then try again. All right, that's much better. I'm okay with that. Okay, so now we're just going to insert it into that center, just like this. Push down those raw edges, and we're just going to fuse this in place. So now grab your 2 rectangle rings, and we're going to slide these onto the strap. So we're just going to fold both of these rectangle rings on just like this. I'm just going to add a couple clips around them to help hold them in place. So now we want to close up the raw edges of our handle. So we're going to take our handle strip and pull it right sides together so that the short edges are lining up with one another. And then just clip those in place. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now you can just kind of press this seam allowance open with your fingers. And then fold down those long edges just like this. We can fold this whole thing right side out. All right, so now you can slide your D-rings to the edge of your strap. And then what we're going to do is just clip the front and the back sides of our strap together. So we have one nice, seamless, clean strap, just like this. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're just going to sew a rectangle around all of the edges, just getting as close as we can to these rectangle rings without actually hitting them with our needle. and staying about 1/8 of an inch away from the long edges. This is just going to stitch everything together and keep it in place nicely. So now we have our strap all ready to go. Let's now prepare the connectors for install. What we're going to do is we're going to fold the short edges up together with the raw edges together like that, and then just press. Do the same with the other strap connector. Fold it up and press. And then take the short edges and fold them wrong sides together and press up to meet that middle fold. What we're doing is we're just hiding all of the raw edges. There we go. Do the same with the other strap connector. So now take one of your rectangle rings and slide a connector over that. So you should have it so that the right side of your handle is facing up and the right side of the connectors are facing up. Now you can just clip these connectors in place. Do the same with the other side. Wrap it around. So now grab your exterior top and AB panels with the zipper inside. And what we want to do is find the midpoint here. So just go ahead and fold them in half, short sides together. What you can do is just kind of clip a little bit on that corner to help you find the midpoint. We're going to need these midpoints in a future step, so just do it all now. And I'm just making sure I'm not clipping any of the stitches. I'm just clipping like that. So there's our midpoint. It's marked. So now you notice that the top panel B pattern piece has a handle placement box here. You can go ahead and cut that out. So with top panel B side up, we want to line up the fold edge with the center of our top panel unit. And this dashed line should line up with the zipper. So if you have to move it down a little bit, that's perfectly fine. You can see mine is just like this. So I'm going to grab some of my double-sided tape and just put a couple strips on the backs of my connectors. And what that will do is that will hold all of this together really well. All right, once you have your tape on there, make sure everything is lined up. You could also use glue for this step. You just want something that's going to help you hold the strap connector onto the bag. So lift up your pattern piece, making sure you're not moving it around too much. Line it up with that handle placement window and just push it down. And there you go. And you can readjust it as you need to if you have any ends poking out. There we go. Okay, now we're going to do the same with the other side. So I'm going to add my tape first. And depending on the size of your double-sided tape, I'm going to use 2 strips. I also have leather double-sided tape, which is much, much stronger tape than this. And for that, I really only need 1 piece of tape. It just depends on what you're using. So once you have your tape applied, take that top panel B pattern piece again and line it up face down this time since we're doing the other side. Doing your best, if you want, just fold up that folded side and make sure it goes along the center of your zipper. Here we go. And then just like before, we're going to lift this up and place our connector in that window, just like that. Since I'm not using vinyl or anything, I'm just going to put a pin in this, just to help keep it from moving around too much. All right, so now we want to go to the sewing machine and we want to sew these down. To do that, we're just going to top stitch along the connector, getting as close as we can to our rectangle ring without hitting it. Use about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around the other 3 corners. Do this for both connectors. So once you have your handle attached, you can go ahead and just move this to the side for now. So now we're going to attach the piping. Grab your exterior panel that has the foam on it and your piping. What you want to do is start on the bottom center and leave about an inch of your piping just hanging off the edge like this. And then just work your way around, clipping the piping in place. The rounded edge of the piping should be pointing into the center of the panel, and the raw edges should be against the raw edges of your exterior panel. When we make our piping, we cut the fabric on the bias. This allows the fabric to stretch nicely, so you shouldn't have any problem getting it around those corners. But just make sure to use lots of clips if you are struggling to keep it from straightening up. So once you come to the midpoint on the bottom, once again, just go ahead and clip your piping up to the other piping, and once again, let it overhang about an inch, and then cut it. So we want the ends of our piping to overhang one another, just like that. And ideally, we have them cross over just a little bit. There we go. So before you stitch this on, change your bobbin thread to a different color that will be very visible on the back. It should be a different color than what you're stitching with. So for me, that's going to be hot pink. We're going to use a zipper foot, and we're going to machine base this on. What you're trying to do is just stitch over the existing stitching on the piping, so it's probably going to be about a 1/2 inch in. We just want to get as close to this as possible and right over those stitches. When we sew this bag together in the end, we don't want any of these stitches showing. Alright, so here's our piping for one panel. You can see on the back I have that nice different colored thread. That's going to help me in a later step. So now we're going to repeat this process for the exterior panel with the pocket. Once again, make sure you have an inch overhanging on the bottom. And then just clip around the entire unit, making sure the piping side, which is the folded cushy side of your piping, is facing in towards the panel, and the raw edges are lined up with the raw edges of the panel. And just like before, make sure you leave about an inch overhanging. Now once again, let's take this to the sewing machine, and we're just going to sew over the stitches that are on the piping, making sure we have a darker thread on our bobbin so that we can see those stitches on the back side. All right, once you have your piping installed on both panels, you can put these to the side. I'm not going to be putting the piping on the bottom exterior panel. You definitely can. I'm just choosing not to today. Before we put these to the side, you can go ahead and just trim off the ends of your piping so that it's the same size as the panel. And piping is not something that's required. You can definitely skip this step if you don't have piping or don't want to use piping. What I find the nice thing about piping is that yes, it offers a little bit of a pop of color and cleanliness to the bag, but it also hides some of the mistakes that I make when I'm sewing the bag together. I have a very hard time with curves, and piping just kind of covers up those little wonky bits of my seam, and I'll show you what I mean when we get to that point. So now grab your exterior top panel unit with the handle and your exterior bottom panel. What we're going to do is we're going to line up the bottom panel with the exterior top panel right sides together. If you cut a little slit in your foam like I did, just make sure it's going in the same direction as your zipper, so don't attach it like this with the slit over here. That's not going to do you any good. You want it to be just like this, where the slit is going right along the zipper seam, and then just clip these right sides together. Now I didn't use piping here, but what I'm going to do is just sew these pieces together at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So now once you have that bottom panel attached, what you want to do is press that seam allowance against the bottom panel. I'm just going to finger press it like this. And then we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along this bottom panel at an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have your bottom panel top stitch, we can just go ahead and repeat this on the other end. So once again, take the other end of your top A and B unit and line it up right sides together with that bottom panel. lining up those short edges, and then just clip in place. And I'm going to sew these together at 3/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, as you can see, we have this all stitched together. I went ahead and back stitched on the bottom panel as well. You can flip this right side out. You can start seeing your unit taking shape. And it is so stinking cute. Alright, so we're going to repeat this process for the lining side. Go ahead and grab your lining top A and B panels. And then also grab your lining bottom panel. Now remember, we cut our stiff interfacing for our lining bottom panel. So just like we did with the exterior, you want to make sure that the slit in your interfacing is running along the same edge as the opening for your zipper. So just check that and then line them up right sides together and clip along that short edge. Alright, so now we can sew these together at anywhere between 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch seam allowance. On my previous bag, I did use 5/8 inch, and I found it to be a bit too big of a seam allowance. My interior of my bag was not coming together quite how I wanted it to, so this time I'm going to work with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you can see I went ahead and top stitched along the bottom panel as well. Let's go ahead and attach this to the other side of the top panel unit. Once again, right sides together, lining up those short edges, and clip in place. So just like before, I'm going to sew these together at anywhere between 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then I will fold the seam behind the back panel and top stitch that. Alright, so now your full lining panel is ready to go. Put that to the side. So what we want to do now is find midpoints on all of our panels so we know how to line them up properly. Turn your outer panel, if you turned it right side out, turn it right side in, so we have wrong side out. And go ahead and fold these top panel units in half. So I'm just going to line up my seam for my bottom panel just like that. And what we want to do is mark our midpoints. So just like we did before, we can just go ahead and clip this. Just make sure you don't clip these stitches holding the foam in place. And that should match up with our top. There we go. So we clipped the top portion earlier. Now we have this part clipped. So now we have the top and bottoms of one side of our exterior gusset marked. Let's do the same thing with the other side. Once again, just line up those seams. The top should already be taken care of from earlier. And we'll just clip the bottom. Alright, so our exterior gusset is ready to go. Let's do the same with our lining gusset. So line up those seams. And then just pull it nice and tight. And then you can use a marker or a pin or just scissors to cut a little triangle out. Alright, so now your lining panel is good to go. Now we want to do the same thing with all 4 main panels. So starting with my exterior panels, I'm just going to fold them together in half. Just lining it up as best I can, trying to find the midpoint. Once I have it, I can just snip again. Now you could use the pattern piece to help you mark the midpoints. However, with all the cutting and ironing and pressing and stretching, sometimes these things aren't the exact same size as they were when we cut out our pattern pieces. So by folding the whole units in half and then figuring out where the midpoints are, you just have the most accurate midpoints marked. I'll do the same for your lining panels. So, everything has been going pretty good. This is the most challenging part of the bag. Sewing curves is just not something that comes easy to me. So, we're going to sew this together as best we can, and if we make some mistakes, I'm going to show you how to fix them. So what you're going to need is your exterior panel with the pocket, and we're going to pin this right sides together with our gusset on the smaller end of the gusset. So top panel A, which is that more narrow strip, we're going to pin this all right sides together, matching the top marks just like this. So remember, the bottom of the gusset is where the bottom panel is, and the bottom of your panel is the flat portion. So the top of each one will be this rounded portion here. Match up your midpoint marks, right sides together, and then just clip these in place. Now we're going to match up the bottom slits just like this and clip in place. And now what we want to do is go around the entire unit, clipping it all together. All right, and you can see that if I have any bunching, I just kind of push that into the corner section, just like that. All right, so there's one side. Let's go ahead and do the other side. I just start pinning at the top curve. I go about 1/4 of the way around, and then I'll add a little bit to the straight bottom edge. And when I'm pinning, I'm not pulling the pieces taut and flat. I'm kind of letting them crinkle just a little bit, because curves are the worst. They just are. They're hard. So there we go. And you can see as I'm doing this, I'm pushing that top panel down and keeping the gusset flat, just like that. Don't try to pull it all out and keep it flat like a rim of a hat. We're going to tuck the exterior panel in, so we're making like a bowl. Now make sure you're folding your piping fabric out of the way. Sometimes the fabric from the piping likes to fold under and then it will peek out in the end, and we don't really want that. So fold it back so that it's flat. If you have areas where the main panel is just kind of bunching up a lot, you just gotta move it around a little bit. Move your clips around. We're just kind of spreading out the bunch. So instead of having one area that has a bunch of material bunched up, we'll spread it around so that the whole curve has a little bit of a loose bunch. There we go. All right, now I've seen lots of people use staples before in their bags. We're going to give it a shot today and try to make sure we don't hurt ourselves. So the areas where you think you're going to have the most difficulty when sewing this together, meaning when we're at the machine, the gusset and the main panel might separate. Now that happens because, these are curved shapes. They want to pull away from each other. Those areas you want to give a staple, and you want to make sure it's within the seam allowance. So I'm just going to make sure it's closer to the edge than my hot pink line here. So there we go. And I'm just going to go around a couple spots where I feel like it's going to pull away and just staple. Now this is probably not the best stapler to use for this because it is so tiny. Okay, so I just stapled a few spots that I anticipate giving me some trouble. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew over our stitches that we use to connect the binding. This is why you used a different color thread. You want to make sure you know which stitches those are. So we're going to sew at the sewing machine with the back of the main panel right side up. And I encourage you to keep your bag tilted up like this as you sew. Don't try to lay it down. Just keep it up and just sew right over those stitches as best you can. All right, there we go. We have it sewn on. So now let's turn it right side out and just see if there's any spots we need to correct. What tends to happen is we can sew over the piping and not have the piping showing, or we don't sew enough of it on one side. See, look at that. That's what happens. All right, so I see lots of mistakes on this side. So from the top, it actually looks pretty decent, but from the gusset side, we have some issues we're gonna have to fix. So first, the most glaring issue here is that the seam didn't get in the actual stitches. So right here, I'm actually going to have to seam rip this and resew it completely, which is totally fine. I'm just going to make sure I backstitch really well around that area. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a marker and I am going to mark in here where I need to fix the problem, just like that. That way when I go back, and I'm going to make a little X here so I know I have to seam rip that. So now I'm going to go around, and if I have any spots where it's really coming out more than I want, here's another one where I'm going to have to fix because the seam came out again. So you can see I didn't pay enough attention whenever I was clipping it together to make sure the edges of the seam weren't being folded out like that. And then you can see right here, I have the binding looks okay on one side, but not the other side. So right here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew a little bit closer to the binding. So what that means is I'm just going to increase my seam allowance just a little bit right here. So I know that here, I'm just going to take it in a little bit more to get closer to that binding. And this is what I do. I'll just go around the entire bag. Some areas are not perfect and I'll let it go. Other areas, if I feel like I can fix it pretty easily, all I'm going to do is just sew in a little bit to get closer to that piping. And up here. And this is just how I figure it. So I just push it with my finger, mark on the other side that I need to fix that. And then this side, I know I have to fix. Okay, so let's do this. So I'm going to turn it wrong side out again. Now, I'm going to start with the areas that I need to seam rip. You can see one of the exterior panels is tucked in there. So let's just go ahead and seam rip around this. And right where I'm seam ripping, so I can even mark it here just so I make sure. I'm going to go back over from like right here and backstitch really heavily at the beginning and the ends just to make sure everything is secure. I did this with my other bag and I haven't had any problems with using it or anything coming apart. Now I can just poke my finger in through the inside and help pull it apart a little bit and push my fabric up where it's supposed to be, just like that. And then I'm going to push it all back down, making sure all my layers are good now. I'm going to give this a staple. So now I know from about right over here to all the way close to that seam over here. I'm going to sew again, backstitching really well. So I'm going to do the same thing to fix the other spot where I had this seam coming out. I put my hand inside the bag to help separate those layers. Find my troublemaking fabric. Hello there. And then I just kind of keep pulling so you can see it's still tucked in over here. Be very careful if you use staples because they will poke you. All right, and so now I'm just going to restaple this. All right, so I know this area here needs to be resewn. I'm just going to go quite a bit away from where I ripped the stitches and backstitch heavily there. Okay, and so then I know I have a spot here that I just need to get a little bit closer, so I'm just going to sew more into the bag, a spot up here, spot here. All right, there we go. So let's go back to the sewing machine and try to fix these problem areas. All right, so we fixed those areas. Let's take a look and see if it helped any. Hopefully we didn't create any new problems. That's the thing with curves. They're just a lot of work. This bag comes together so well until this point. This point, it gets tricky. But all right, I'm happy with that. There's still some areas that could be more perfect, but I'm okay with it. So you can see it looks really nice with the piping. After we give it a good press, everything is going to just line up perfectly. That's turning out really nice. So this is the front of the bag. Let's attach the back panel. We're going to do that the same way. Push the whole thing wrong side out. And you can unzip your zipper about halfway here too. And then just like before, we're going to line up the top of the outer panel with the top of the gusset. Just matching up those midpoint marks and clip. And then do the same with the bottom. Match them up and clip together. And then we'll just go around the sides and clip it as best we can. Again, make sure you're very loose with your outer panel. Don't try to keep that really taut. You're gonna have excess. All right, we have it all clipped together again. So I'm not going to use a stapler this time, but when we're at the sewing machine, I have to be very careful about making sure that the gusset panel doesn't start sliding away from the lineup that I have already pinned. To help me, I will be using a stiletto and slowly stitching, just super slowly stitching. I mean, one of the best tricks here is to clip like crazy and don't remove the clip until the presser foot gets to that clip. So once the presser foot is touching the clip, then remove it and just sew as slow as you can. All right, here we go. Let's open this up and see how the second portion went. Now this was the back panel. When I did this one, you could tell in the video, I was trying harder to stay on the inside of that piping line that we have on the back panel, just to help me out a little bit more. Now this side turned out much better. So I will say using a stiletto and going slow and trying to make sure I kept my stitches inside that red stitch line that I had for my piping, that helped a lot. This is the first and only time I've not had to fix anything in the piping. So that looks amazing. Look at that. All right, so here's what we're looking at right now. This one folds open really nicely too. Having that little slit in the foam is really good at keeping this nice and open. So let's just turn it wrong side out again and trim down our seam allowance. Just need to trim it down to about 1/4 inch. We can try to trim out these staples as well. You don't want to leave the staples in the bag because eventually they will poke out. All right, once you have it all trimmed down, you can turn it right side out. So the outer panel is ready to go. Let's just repeat this process for the lining. So the lining is much the same, just thinner layers. Unless you're using different fabrics or have a directional print, it doesn't really matter which lining piece you use on which gusset panel. The narrower gusset panel will be the top of the bag. So if you had a pocket or anything like that attached to your lining panel, you're going to probably want to put that against the top portion. So I'll start with the top of the bag. And once again, line up my midpoints right along the top. And then line them up right sides together along the bottom. And then I'm just going to go around and clip the whole thing in place. Even though the lining is thinner, it can actually be a little bit more tricky because it wants to be really flat like paper. So you're going to have to just kind of squish it in order for it to fit. Again, we're doing a bowl situation here where the gusset is going to be nice and flat, and then we're just kind of shoving the main panel into it like that. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the clipped edge at anywhere between 5/8 to 3/4 inch seam allowance. All right, there we go. We have the top lining panel stitched on. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the bottom lining panel. So this will go on the other end on the B unit. And once again, just line up those top midpoint marks and pin together. And line up the bottom midpoint marks. And then we'll just go along the entire edge. All right, once again, we'll take this to the sewing machine and just sew along this clipped edge at anywhere between 5/8 inch and 3/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have the remaining lining panel sewn on, once again, we're just going to go around and trim down our seam allowance to about 1/4 inch. All right, now our lining panel is ready to go. So now your lining should be wrong side out, which just means that it's kind of the way it's supposed to be in the finished product. Grab your exterior with right sides out. Unzip your zipper all the way. It should lay nice and flat open. Now we're just going to drop in our lining and push it all the way down. Tuck it in nice and snug in there. We'll do the same on the top panel. Just tucking that in nice and snug. Oh yeah, this is coming together very nicely. All right, so the creased center of your lining on the bottom panel should line up right with the zipper. Just kind of adjust it if you need to. There we go. And then just go around your zipper and clip your lining panel up against the zipper teeth. So it should extend just as far up as your exterior. The lining and the exterior folds of fabric kind of hug that zipper. Just clip all the way around. So I'm going to sew these on one side at a time. So I'm just going to kind of pin this lining to the top flap so it's out of the way. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch over this edge. So we're just going to go over the previous top stitch lines, and that's going to include the lining in our stitches and just keep the whole thing down. If you can't get super close to the zipper, that's okay. Just get as close as you can. Go all the way around. Whatever little opening we have left, we'll close with hand stitching. Once you have this top stitched on, you can see that it's nice and firm in place. There's a little bit of an opening on the sides by the zipper, but that's okay. We can hand sew that in the next step. Now we're just going to repeat this process for the top flap. So once again, I'm just going to kind of tuck it in there and pin around the entire top edge, matching up the fold of my lining panel with the top fold of that exterior panel. So it should just go up as high as the exterior panel. This probably means it's going to be covering your zipper. That's perfectly fine. All right, so once you have this all pinned, we're going to take this back to the sewing machine and once again just go over that previous top stitching to hold down the lining. once you have the top attached, now all we have to do is just close up these very small holes on the side. They're really not that big at all, but we can close those up. So I have the size 10 large eye milliner's needles and a leather thimble. I use it on my middle finger because that's the finger I always use to push the end of the needle, and a needle threader. And I'm just using the same thread from my sewing machine. So I pull off about 25 to 30 inches of thread and cut it. And I'll just grab one of my needles. I'll use my needle threader to help me thread it. And now I like to double up my thread when I'm closing things in bags just to help it be a little bit stronger. So what I do is I get both of the ends of the thread and pinch them to meet. With my left hand, I hold the ends of the thread. With my right hand, I hold the needle. I'm going to wrap the ends of the thread, holding the thread down with my pointer finger of my needle. Wrap it around about 4 times, and then just slide it over the end of your needle, down your thread, and then you'll have a nice little knot. I know that seems kind of complicated, but if you try it a few times and you get it, it'll stick with you. All right, so now I'm just going to insert my needle between the zipper and my lining panel and just have it come out where my thread stopped on my lining panel side. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm still trying to keep the top folded edges of my exterior and my lining panel to be the same height. And I'm just going to insert my needle all the way through so that it comes out in the stitches on the exterior side, like that. Pull it out. And then I'm just going to kind of follow the top stitching all the way through to the lining panel side. And if you're using coordinating thread, which means it kind of matches the thread, especially on your lining panel, then you don't have to be too precise with this because honestly, no one's really going to notice the thread right here by the zipper. So again, I'm just pushing it out in the stitches close to the zipper. And I'm just going to go as close as I can following the top stitching. And once you get to a point where you feel like you've gone far enough, just insert back to the lining side. And then from here, we can insert it behind the lining, but bring it out before it goes through the zipper, just like that. And in this little area here between the lining panel and the zipper, we can just kind of go back and forth a few times and create a couple of lines of stitches. I'm just inserting it into the zipper tape. And then what I do is I leave a nice little loop before I pull it all the way through, stick my needle through that loop, and it's just a nice tight knot. Then what you can do is insert the needle into that fold of your lining, right next to that knot, push it through a little bit, and then push it all the way out, and then trim the thread where you pushed it out by the lining. This just hides that thread tail in the lining panel. This is not perfect, but it will do. So I'm going to do that for all 3 edges next to the zipper. All right, are you ready to see the bag? Oh, I love pink. I just love pink. It's such a happy, happy color. Look how adorable this came out. I love that pop of green on the piping and the handle. I'm really glad that we chose a different fabric for the handle in this pocket. So let's open her up. Again, we have that beautiful all the way around zipper. And then we open it all the way up. More pink, of course, why not? Look at that, right? I mean, come on. Doesn't just feel like an old-timey cosmetic case. Like you couldn't, it's hard to find things like this in the stores, right? A lot of the stuff we make, we can find in the stores, But this is a design that's very, very unique. It's very vintage, which is what it's called in the pattern. Oh my gosh, I love this bag, right? Yes. All right, so let's just look at these little sisters together, right? Oh my goodness. Just like most of the things I make, these have already been claimed. But I tell you what, I think I'm going to make a couple more of these and give them as a giveaway gift because I cannot believe I made these. I honestly cannot believe I made these. These are incredible. So, it's not the easiest bag in the entire world to make. It's not. It's got a lot of curves, and curves are challenging, but you can do this. You can make this bag. This is a good bag where you can make mistakes and you can fix them as you go. A mistake in this bag doesn't mean the whole bag is ruined. You can fix them as you go. Give yourself time. Don't rush through it. If it doesn't get done in a day, that's okay. I sincerely hope you enjoy making this bag. If you make one, please make sure you tag me on social media. I want to see what you guys are doing with this pattern. It is so incredible. Thank you again so much to Ashley from Zeep for sending me these amazing bath products. These things just smell like heaven and literally change the mood in my house. Smell can do that, but right now, a lot of us need a mood change. So if you're interested in purchasing these, make sure you go to her website down in the description below. Keep an eye out on social media and on the posts on YouTube. I will be hosting a giveaway for a gift certificate to her shop. I truly cannot say enough good things about these products and about this pattern. I am just a very happy girl right now. So this is the ultimate gift for anybody dealing with anxiety, frustration right now with everything going on in the world. I hope you make this for yourself. I hope you make it for a friend. Thank you so much for watching. Get out there and make something. Bye.